Welcome back, everyone. So, we all have a new routine right now during lockdown. Some people are making puzzles, other people are video chatting all the time, others are reorganizing their closets. But if there's one activity that has taken over, it's baking. Everybody is baking bread. If you, though, want some more help and need some tips on baking, especially baking without yeast, we have invited back to the show Jeff Richards to help us out. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Hi there. I'm good. Just doing my own quarantining over here and trying to keep busy, but I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
I know for many people, the idea of making your own bread can be intimidating and overwhelming. So, what are some basics that we should all know to make the process a little less daunting?
When it comes to bread making, it should be fun. It's important to have fun while we're doing it. So be patient, learn the dough. Like when you're playing with dough and you're making your bread, feel it. And it's going to change every single time you make it due to the moisture in your home, how warm it is outside. It's a pretty finicky thing. So I think it's starting off with some simple recipes. Number one, perfecting those, and then just kind of going up the ladder of bread making. But take your time, be patient, and have fun.
Now, none of the recipes that you're going to show us today involve yeast, which is a bonus because it's kind of hard to find right now. But how does it work without yeast?
Yeah, I chose not to do the yeast thing after I went to the store a couple weeks ago and I couldn't find any. So I've switched out all of that for baking soda and baking powder, kind of interchangeable in different recipes here. But that's what's going to give us that aeration and that leavener in our bread making that the yeast normally would provide for us.
Okay, so we are going to go with your approachable breads, starting with your grandma's soda bread. I will disclose that actually a few weeks ago, I made my own soda bread. And the recipe I used involved, I think, a mixture of flour and butter. And I believe there was a little bit of honey and some milk. And I found the consistency at the end, I really liked it, but it was a little bit more like a scone than it was like a regular type of bread. Tell me about your recipe. What's in yours?
This is my great grandmother's recipe. She says to use whole wheat flour, just regular AP flour, some baking soda, some water, and some salt. And then basically you make this dough and you get it all nice and combined, and you roll it out on the table, and you get it all ready to go. And it should be a nice loaf, about yay big, as you can see this guy. And then when it's ready to go in the oven, because I said it was a denser bread, it does need the middle to cook a little bit quicker before it kind of burns on the outside. So you do a cross on the top to make it cook quicker on the inside. And then, as the Irish say, to keep the devil away, this is why they do the cross on top, dual function there. And then it goes into a 425-degree oven, and it comes out half an hour later. And it looks like this. And you just check to see if it's cooked by hitting the bottom of it, and it's hollow on the inside, and it's ready to eat. It's ready to go.
You mentioned that you use whole wheat flour in that recipe with also AP flour, which I think is all-purpose flour, and that's white flour. Yeah. And there's so many different kinds of flours. I'm very confused. So are they interchangeable? Let's say that I've run out of AP flour, but I have a bag of whole wheat flour. And there are recipes that I'm trying to follow that call for AP flour. Can I substitute whole wheat flour into that?
Sure. Yeah, you could, especially for this recipe, you can definitely use strictly whole wheat flour for it. But in regards to just interchanging flours for bread, I would highly suggest sticking with more strong, hard flours, which would be like a bread flour, whole wheat, or an all-purpose AP flour. Just due to, it has to have high gluten and high protein content in the flour in order to give it some rise and some elasticity, which the gluten will do for you. So I would recommend only using those three when you're trying to make a really nice loaf of bread.
Next up, you've got a foolproof focaccia. So say you. Tell us about the recipe.
I love this recipe. I think it's super versatile. It's made from semolina flour, all-purpose flour, water, salt, and oil, extra virgin olive oil. It's fantastic. It's just mixing your wet ingredients into your dry, kneading that on the counter for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then keeping it in the fridge for about half an hour. And then when it comes out, you can bake it a few different ways. So the way that you see I've done it today is you just separate it into 6 different balls, and then roll them out nice and thin, and then put it in the oven at about 450 for 10 minutes, and they come out looking like this. I put rosemary and salt on mine. I love it classic like that. Or you can take the 6 balls that you rolled out really nice and thin, and you can put that into a dry, hot pan on the stove, and then they'll puff up like naan bread. So it's super delicious. Or you can keep it as one big loaf, pat it down on a roasting tray, and bake it like a regular old focaccia in the oven for 10, 15 minutes and it'll be ready as well. But it's super versatile and it's fantastic. I love this recipe.
I didn't even know what semolina flour was. That's the first time I've ever said the word semolina. Second time. So I obviously don't have any. So can you like substitute it and make a focaccia without it?
You can make a focaccia without it. For this recipe, I highly suggest getting some semolina flour. It's just the coarse milling of durum wheat flour. It's just like more of a coarse flour that you kind of get. It's fantastic for pasta, for making pizza doughs and this kind of dough and couscous. So it's also something that no one really uses that much. So you can get it at the grocery store or like a wholesaler store or something like that. So for this recipe, I would say use the semolina flour. And if you pick some up, like you can do so much more with it than just regular all-purpose flour.
But message to people watching, don't hoard it, please. Leave some for everyone. Thank you.
That's right. That's right.
Lastly, Jeff, you mentioned pizza dough. I have never even thought for some reason about making it myself, and yet you claim it's kind of simple. So tell us about how you make it.
This recipe is fantastic. It's super easy and delicious. It's 4 ingredients. It's self-rising flour, some milk, some sugar, and some olive oil. It all comes together by just mixing your wet ingredients into your dry. You want to knead that on the counter just like everything else. Keep it in the fridge for 10 minutes and then roll it out. And the best thing is when you roll this out, try like a 1/4 inch thick. You want to bake this at like a 425 degree oven for about 15 minutes with nothing on it, like a blind bake. And then take it out, put all your fixins on it, and then put it back in the oven for like another 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then it all comes together and it's super delicious. I did mine with just some basil and some herbs and sun-dried tomatoes today, but the world's your oyster. It's really good.
So I actually tried for the first time a couple weeks ago making my own pizza. I was very stressed because it was my first time and I was like watching to see if the dough would rise. I was pretty happy with it in the end, but I did find that my crust was a bit too thick. What is the key to making sure that your crust is just perfect and soft?
Pizza dough is finicky, like no doubt. So this is just some pizza dough that I made. That's the same doughs that you see here. It's all about being careful and aggressive at the same time, if that makes any sense, right? So it's just a matter of when you make it nice and thin, it will tear on you and it will happen. But see, if you start getting a tear, I'm purposely tearing this here. You just take a little bit of dough and you just stuff it there. So you get it like kind of like a glue. And then you want to work it out with your hands to kind of give it some looseness there. And then I like to just use a rolling pin and just roll it out. And if you just take your time and don't force it too hard and just kind of keep turning it every which way, it has less of a chance of tearing, more of a chance of getting nice and thin for the oven. So that's like the biggest tips and trick when you want to do a pizza dough. Don't be throwing it up into the ceiling and like doing all the cool pizza tricks. It's just taking your time, just letting it relax and letting it do its thing.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I was really anxious when I was doing this because I was like, is it really going to rise? And my rise, or the recipe I used, said 90 minutes. Yours, though, is like 10 in the fridge. So why is there such a big difference?
You're using the yeast. You gotta bloom the yeast, right? It eats the sugar, it releases carbon dioxide, burps it all up. Hence why you get all the rise. That's why your dough probably went from this big to this big.
Yeah.
Mine is using self-rising flour, so it just has some baking powder in it. It doesn't really activate until it hits a heating source. So the real reason that you just put it in the fridge is before that you're about to like put it through more motion to kind of roll it out, you want it to relax in the fridge, all the gluten to just relax before you kind of tighten them all up again before you finish the product. So yeah, no yeast, you don't need to proof.
What if you don't have self-rising flour, Jeff?
You can make your own self-rising flour, just a cup of flour, regular old all-purpose flour, and then 2 teaspoons of baking powder and a teaspoon of salt. And that will be a nice little bit of self-rising flour. So if you want to make more than that, you always do the same equivalent of baking powder to salt all the way up. If it's 1 cup, then 2 cups, and you just double it, double it, double it.
Hey, Jeff, it's been so nice to see you. Thank you for helping us become better bakers For all of Jeff's recipes and his tips and tricks, head to our website after the show and also show us what you've been baking. Take pictures, send it to us at the social CTV. We want to see. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.